When we think about spotting a fire, I think human nature basically conditions us to look for the really obvious stuff. Like we scan the horizon for those giant billowing clouds of black smoke or, the bright orange flames just violently licking the ceiling.
Right, because by the time you actually see the flames, the situation requires zero interpretation. Like you just pull the alarm, it's a completely binary instinctual reaction at that point.
Exactly. It's undeniable. And the response is this immediate primal panic. But if you talk to a real fire safety engineer, they'll tell you something completely different. They'll tell you that by the time you see those flames, the critical failure has already happened. You've already lost the building.
Oh, absolutely. The real art, or really the actual science of prevention, is detecting that invisible, subtle chemical shift in the ambient air, right when the wire first sparks behind the drywall, long before the smoke.
Yes, the invisible sparks. And that brings us perfectly to the mission of today's deep dive. We have an incredible journey today, tailored specifically for you listening, diving into the customized stack of intelligence you provided. We are going to build a deterministic alarm system.
And it is a phenomenal stack of operational data you've brought us. I mean, it all revolves around one incredibly complex, high-stakes challenge, which is mastering the absolute precision required to identify and prioritize at-risk accounts.
Right, doing it long before they ever reach that point of combustion. And before we get into the actual mechanics of this, I do want to set a very strict boundary for our deep dive today. We are looking strictly at detection and prioritization. That is it.
Yeah, that's an important distinction to make.
Right, like we're not talking about remediation today. We aren't discussing the apology emails or discount strategies or how to rebuild a broken relationship. We are focusing entirely on how to read the complex telemetry of your accounts and deciding which subtle spark to run toward first.
Because here is the hook, right? Most account churn, like most catastrophic client losses, they aren't actually a surprise.
Not even a little bit.
No. When you look at the postmortems, the surprise is usually just a symptom of really poor operational visibility.
Yes. Churn is an operational failure. I mean, the signals existed in the data, the telemetry was screaming, but the team just lacked a repeatable, objective way to process those signals. So today, we are going to transform those vague, anxiety-inducing gut feelings you might have about account risk
into a cold, hard mathematical detection grid.
Exactly, a pure formula.
And to build that grid, the very first step, like the absolute prerequisite, is to completely and utterly discard your gut feeling.
Oh wow, just throw it out entirely.
Entirely. Because relying on an account manager's intuition about account health is a guaranteed way to miss the early warnings. I mean, human intuition is just hopelessly biased toward recent interactions.
Oh, I see what you mean. Like you had a pleasant, friendly catch-up call with a client yesterday. Your brain automatically categorizes that account as healthy.
Exactly. Your gut says everything is fine because they sounded nice on the phone, even if their actual underlying product usage has quietly fallen off a cliff over the last month.
So we really do need a formula to override our own biases. We need objective math.
Precisely. And the at-risk playbook frameworks you shared provide this brilliant priority equation for exactly this. Risk priority is a function of three distinct variables: severity, velocity, and impact.
Severity, velocity, impact.
Right,
Yeah.
and you calculate these continuously. So let's look at how the playbook recommends weighting the baseline severity, which is what we normally call the overall health score. It breaks down into a 100-point system.
Okay, lay it out for me.
So product usage is the heavyweight, sitting at 40%. Next, you have outcomes or milestone completion at 25%.
Okay, making sense so far.
Then support health sits at 15%. Commercial signals, so things like billing, are weighted at 10%. And finally, sentiment is the final 10%.
Okay, let's unpack this right here.
Yeah.
Because I'm looking at those weights and I have to push back immediately. Go for it.
Commercial signals are only weighted at 10%. I mean, if I loan a friend money and they suddenly stop paying me back, I do not consider that a 10% issue. I consider that a massive flashing red emergency for the state of our relationship.
That's a fair point.
Right. So why on earth is the actual flow of money, like the billing delinquency, weighted so dramatically lower than just logging into the software? Cash is king, right?
Well, cash is king for the CFO, but for the account manager trying to detect risk, cash is a tombstone.
Tombstone.
Yeah. What's fascinating here is the critical difference between a leading indicator and a lagging indicator. By the time an invoice is 60 days past due, or a contract is actively being disputed in procurement, the account hasn't just sparked. It has been engulfed in flames for 2 quarters.
Yeah, okay.
Billing issues are the ultimate lagging indicator.
But isn't stopping payment the literal definition of churning? I mean, if the cash stops flowing, the business relationship is functionally dead.
It is dead, yes. But remember the boundary we set. We are here to talk about detection. Why did they stop paying? Because they weren't happy.
Because they stopped finding value long before the invoice was ever generated. This is why product usage sits at that massive 40% weight. It is your ultimate leading indicator of value realization. If their key users aren't logging in, if they aren't executing the core workflows your product was built for, their internal return on investment has already dropped to zero. The payment failure is just the administrative echo of a usage failure that happened months ago.
Oh man, that is a phenomenal way to frame it. The payment failure is just the administrative echo. Okay, that makes total sense now. But what about outcomes at 25% versus support at 15%?
Yeah, that's another common trip up.
I feel like a lot of teams spend all their time staring at support tickets. But the formula says hitting milestones is significantly more important than whether the product is buggy.
Exactly, because we have to look at the psychology of software adoption here. You can have a buggy product. A client might submit 10 support tickets a month because a certain reporting feature is really clunky.
Right, they're annoyed.
Sure, they're annoyed. But if they're still hitting their operational milestones, if they're still processing their payroll or launching their campaigns or achieving whatever outcome they bought your tool for, they rarely churn. Frustration does not equal churn. Failure to achieve outcomes equals churn.
Got it. Okay, so once we run this math and generate that 100-point score, we basically map it to standard RAG thresholds, right? Red, amber, green.
Correct. Your detection system dictates strict service level agreements based on that RAG status. So the critical bucket, which is any account with a health score between 0 and 40, triggers a strict 2-hour response SLA.
2 hours. That is incredibly tight.
It is. Crucially, though, you don't have to fix the root cause in 2 hours. That's impossible. But the alarm must be acknowledged, triaged, and assigned within 120 minutes.
Right.
Then you have the at-risk bucket sitting at a score of 41 to 60, which requires a deeper assessment response within 24 to 72 hours.
Okay, this all sounds perfectly logical until you apply it to the real world.
How so?
Well, because in the real world, you might have 5 alarms going off at the exact same time. You have 5 accounts drop into the critical bucket on a random Tuesday morning. You have to decide who gets that 2-hour SLA attention first. Which I guess brings us to the interaction between the severity of the score and those other 2 variables you mentioned, velocity and impact.
Exactly. This is where triage gets complicated.
Because human nature, the same human nature that looks for billowing smoke, tells us to protect the biggest pile of money first. Like if my highest AR client is in trouble, I drop everything else, period.
It's a completely natural instinct, but it's often the wrong one. The operations playbook data introduces a highly contrarian insight for triage here. When you are allocating urgent attention, velocity must be ARR.
Wait, really? The speed of the telemetry drop matters more than the actual size of the contract?
It absolutely does in an emergency triage scenario. Let's just contrast 2 specific situations. So you have a massive enterprise tier account, huge annual recurring revenue, but their health score is slowly, predictably drifting downward by maybe a point or 2 a month.
Okay, slowly.
Right, it's a serious issue, yes. But compare that to a much smaller, lower AR account that experiences a 60% collapse in core product usage in a single 48-hour window.
Oh, wow.
The playbook insists that the sudden violent collapse of the smaller account requires immediate prioritization over the slow drift of the larger account.
Here's where it gets really interesting for me. Because if you think about this through the lens of contagion, it changes the entire dynamic. It's like, okay, think of it like ship maintenance.
Okay, I like a good analogy.
If you have a massive cruise ship, right? A huge enterprise account. And it has slow, known leak in the hull. You can manage that systematically. You know the water's coming in, your pump's running. You can map out a 6-month save plan. Maybe their new VP prefers a competitor, but it's a known, isolated variable.
Exactly. It's manageable.
But a sudden sudden 60% velocity drop. That's not a cruise ship with a slow leak. That is a tiny dinghy whose bottom just completely fell out. And if you don't jump on that catastrophic rescue immediately, the panic spreads to the rest of the fleet.
That is spot on. A velocity drop of that magnitude means something is fundamentally broken today. Like a critical API integration just snapped, or a massive data breach occurred, or maybe their sole clinical champion just walked out the door without passing on the administrator credentials.
And if you don't jump on that catastrophic failure immediately, that's the contagion. They're suddenly in industry Slack channels or private forums panicking about your software. They're telling their vendor network that your product is completely broken.
Precisely. You triage the velocity to stop the contagion, and then you systematically address the slow drift of the larger accounts.
So understanding the math of the collapse and knowing how to prioritize velocity, that's all great theory. But how does an account manager actually organize a massive portfolio to watch for these signals? I mean, if you're managing 200 accounts, you can't manually calculate velocity drops every morning over coffee.
You can't. And if you try, you just drown in the noise. This is where mathematical segmentation becomes your only lifeline.
Segmentation, like the 80-20 rule.
Exactly. You have to apply a Pareto distribution dynamically across your portfolio using a strict A, B, and C classification system. A accounts are the top 20% driving 80% of revenue, the critical few requiring deep continuous relationship monitoring. B accounts are the solid mid-tier, maybe the next 15%, and C accounts are the massive 65% long tail, where risk detection must be almost entirely automated.
But hold on. If we rely purely on historical data to assign those tiers, like if we only look at what an account spent last year to decide if they get A-tier monitoring, aren't we just driving while looking in the rearview mirror? We're going to completely miss the accounts that are poised for massive growth.
Yes, that is the ultimate trap of basic segmentation. And it's exactly why the SAMA frameworks, the Strategic Account Management Association documentation you provided, warn against relying solely on trailing revenue. If you just sort your CRM by last year's ARR, you completely blind yourself to the emerging A account.
Okay, let's define the emerging A, because this feels like the holy grail of account management.
It really is. An emerging A is an account currently sitting in your B tier. Perhaps their current contract is relatively small, but their firmographic data shows massive untapped potential. Your assessment grid has to calculate this based on forward-looking metrics.
Like what kind of metrics?
Things like their total employee headcount, their overall industry footprint, or even incredible feature adoption velocity within the small subset of licenses they do currently have.
So they're essentially a giant enterprise account trapped in a starter tier contract.
Exactly. And your detection grid must flag these accounts for A-tier monitoring immediately, regardless of what they're paying you today. In fact, the SAMA frameworks noted that mature programs earn 10% higher margins simply by maintaining a disciplined focus on detecting and prioritizing these emerging A relationships over the general noise of the portfolio.
I want to focus on that word noise for a second, because how does an account manager avoid what I call reactive AM syndrome?
Oh, I know exactly what you mean by that.
Right, where you spend your entire week putting out low-level fires for C-tier accounts simply because those smaller clients happen to be the loudest complainers in your inbox.
To answer that, we have to look at the actual evidence of how risk manifests. And you provided a fantastic real-world healthcare clinic dataset, the MKT370 dataset, to examine this. Let's look at exactly what loud versus quiet risk signals look like in practice. There are two specific account profiles in there that perfectly illustrate this dichotomy.
I love looking at the raw data. Walk me through it.
First, we have an account profiled as Metro Primary Care Northside. This is a standard tier account bringing in a modest $12,000 in ARR, but their telemetry is a complete disaster.
Oh boy.
Yeah. The data flags them with a critical drop post-handoff. Their staff remains largely untrained. They have submitted 6 support tickets recently, and their overall noise flag is marked as high.
Okay, so that is a loud, chaotic risk. The alarms are blaring, the client is visibly frustrated, the tickets are just piling up in the queue. It is almost impossible for an account manager to ignore that.
Right. It takes up all the oxygen in the room. Now contrast that with another account in the dataset, Summit Medical Center, or SMC01. This is a strategic tier account. Massive potential. Their ARR is $30,000, nearly triple that of the Metro Clinic. They even paid for a complex premium Epic integration.
Okay, so huge, important client.
Huge. But look at their behavioral risk signal. The system classifies their telemetry as a ghost town.
A ghost town, meaning zero activity.
Near zero. They have a high-value contract, but their actual monthly screening volume, which is the core outcome of the product, is flatlining. They haven't submitted a single support ticket in weeks. And crucially, the tracking shows they lack any active clinical champion.
Wow.
The staff isn't complaining, they aren't asking for help, they have seemingly just given up and abandoned the workflow entirely.
So what does this all mean?
Yeah.
When I synthesize those two profiles side by side, it completely shifts the paradigm of risk for me.
How so?
Well, the most dangerous account in your portfolio isn't necessarily the one submitting a dozen angry, all-caps support tickets. Sometimes the most terrifying risk is the high-value account that has gone completely, utterly silent. Silence in the context of an emerging A account is a vastly heavier risk weight than a C account complaining.
That is the exact revelation the data is designed to expose. Complaining means they're still trying to use the product. It means they still believe the friction is worth fighting through.
Oh, that's such a good point.
Silence means the fight is over. They have quietly moved on to a workaround or a competitor. And notice the specific non-revenue metrics the dataset tracks to detect the silence. It doesn't just look at logins. It tracks monthly screening volume to measure actual outcomes. It tracks whether a clinical champion is present, and it tracks the EHR status, differentiating between a complex Epic integration versus, say, Athena Health, or a basic paper-based workflow.
Actually, unpack that last one for me. Why does the EHR integration status carry so much weight in the risk assessment formula?
Because integration friction almost always precedes churn. If an account is stuck in a pending Epic integration status for 3 months, their time to value velocity is 0. The software literally cannot do its job. The assessment formula flags that structural blocker as a critical risk long before the renewal conversation even happens. The data just proves that delayed integrations destroy momentum.
Okay, so we've mapped the terrain. We know how to calculate the underlying math with severity, velocity, and impact. We understand why trailing revenue is a trap and why we have to segment to protect those emerging A accounts. And we know how to spot the silent ghost towns hidden in the data.
Yes, the foundational framework is solid.
But let's bring this down to the desk of a busy professional. How does an account manager actually operationalize this detection grid into their daily routine? Because I'm guessing no one has the time to sit and stare at a dashboard of 200 accounts waiting for a little green dot to turn amber.
They absolutely shouldn't be staring at dashboards. The effective time management playbook introduces 2 great concepts here: the 10-minute morning checklist and the top 3 daily focus. And the engine that drives both of those is CRM exception reporting.
Exception reporting.
Yes, this is how you manage a massive portfolio without losing your mind. Instead of running reports that show you everything that is going right or scrolling through endless lists of healthy accounts, you configure your systems to only show you the gaps. You only look at the exceptions to the rules.
Oh, I love that. Give me a tangible example of an exception report in action.
Sure. So you build a dynamic query that strictly pulls A-tier accounts that have had absolutely no meaningful engagements logged in the last 30 days, or a report isolating B accounts with 0 contact in a full quarter, or perhaps most critically for data integrity, a report showing any newly closed accounts that are missing an A, B, or C classification entirely.
It's like the ultimate filter for your attention. I mean, think of a modern smoke detector. You don't sit on your couch staring at the little plastic circle on your ceiling all day to make sure there's no fire.
Right. That would be insane.
You just trust the system to screech only when an anomaly is detected. It frees you up to live your life. Or in this case, it frees the account manager up to be intensely proactive with their A account.
Exactly. If your morning exception report is empty, you don't go hunting for problems. You spend your day deeply strategizing. And the operational playbook adds one final, absolutely vital piece of governance to this entire system. That 100-point health score formula we talked about at the very beginning, you have to treat it as a hypothesis, not a flawless, universal truth.
A hypothesis about risk, meaning it has to be tested.
Yes. You must rigorously validate it quarterly. You take the accounts that actually churned over the last 90 days, and you backtest them against the detection grid.
Oh, that is brilliant.
You ask, did the formula flag them as critical? Did it see the velocity drop? If a client churns and your system had them marked as a green healthy account right up until the cancellation email, your smoke detector is fundamentally broken.
Right, you missed the invisible sparks.
Exactly. You have to adjust the weights. Maybe you need to dramatically increase the weight of the clinical champion presence or decrease the weight of the commercial signals. It must be a living, breathing assessment tool that gets smarter every quarter.
This has been an incredibly eye-opening dive into the pure mechanics of risk. To wrap this up and summarize the mission for you listening, transforming your intuition into a deterministic system means fully embracing the math. It's building a living formula around severity plus velocity plus impact.
And discarding the gut feeling.
Right. It's remembering the contrarian truth that in an emergency triage scenario, the speed of the drop velocity always beats the size of the contract. It's dynamically applying Pareto and ABC classifications so you can hunt for those high potential emerging accounts without being blinded by historical revenue.
Absolutely.
And finally, it's utilizing exception reports to systematically spot the silent high-value ghost downs in your dataset before their silence becomes permanent.
You know, if we connect this to the bigger picture, just looking at how remarkably precise this detection telemetry is becoming, it's wild. We are talking about platforms that can instantly calculate micro velocity drops, automate those exception reports, segment portfolios dynamically based on firmographics, and algorithmically nudge the account manager the very second a clinical champion stops engaging.
It's basically deterministic risk triage at scale.
It is. And this leaves us with a really profound, maybe provocative question for the future of the industry. If the software gets so perfectly good at the math of risk assessment, will the future role of an account manager move away from data analysis entirely?
Oh, that is a fascinating angle. If the machine handles 100% of the detection, what is left for the human?
Exactly. Does the job transform purely into behavioral psychology, where the only thing that matters, the only uniquely human value left in the role is empathy, the negotiation, and the emotional intelligence required to walk a frustrated clinical champion off the ledge once the machine tells you they are standing on it?
That is a brilliant thought to end on. Because the algorithm can tell you exactly where the fire is starting, it can calculate exactly how fast the contagion will spread, but the algorithm can't hold the hose.
No, it can't.
It can't look the client in the eye and rebuild the trust. Thank you so much for bringing such an incredibly deep, challenging stack of intelligence to the table today. We've built the ultimate detection system. Now it's up to you to listen for the exceptions, trust the math over the visible flames, and act before the smoke ever fills the room. Catch you on the next deep dive.